Good afternoon and welcome to Staff Council's 5th Workplace Conversation, celebrating the Martin Luther King Jr. Memorial at the National Mall in Washington, D.C. I'm Leslie Prisky, co-chair of the Staff Council Diversity and Equity and Inclusion Committee. I say that all the time, so sorry about that. The Staff Council DEI Committee is responsible for promoting diverse, equitable, and inclusive initiatives for staff and the UH community. My co-chair is Amber Rangel, who is going to share some more information about our committee. Amber?
Thank you, Leslie. As Leslie mentioned, I'm Amber Rangel, and I'm also a co-chair for the DEI Committee. The Staff Council DEI Committee uses workplace conversations as a platform for both UH staff and community to engage in educational opportunities and discussions around diversity, equity, and inclusion, more formally known here as DEI. Previous workplace conversations have touched on topics such as workplace civility, diversity 101, Arab American struggles, and diverse perspectives. Later this semester, the Staff Council DEI Committee will be hosting a signature event called Her Story, featuring women in leadership at UH. Please follow us on social media at UH Staff Council for upcoming events and more details. Without further ado, please help us welcome the UH Staff Council parliamentarian, Deidre Fontaine, to introduce our special speaker today.
Well, good afternoon. Thank you so much, Amber. I am honored to introduce our guest speaker, Mr. Harry Johnson, who led the Washington, D.C. Martin Luther King Memorial Foundation as president and CEO from 2002 until 2013. The President of the United States and the U.S. Congress charged Johnson and the MLK Foundation with erecting a memorial on the National Mall in Washington, D.C. to honor the life and legacy of Dr. Martin Luther King Jr. And under Johnson's leadership, the MLK Memorial Foundation raised more than $127 million to complete the memorial. Johnson was responsible for providing leadership to an executive leadership cabinet, governing board, and honorary board, along with many volunteers. He garnered support from all living United States presidents, Congress, members of corporate and nonprofit communities, and many celebrities. The memorial dedication was held on October 16, 2011, with the President of the United States, Vice President of the United States, members of the cabinet, congressional members, and others in attendance. In October of 2021, Johnson and the Memorial Foundation held its 10th year commemoration, and what a celebration it was, of what has become the 5th most visited memorial on the Mall. Johnson is a career lawyer, entrepreneur, and public servant. From 2001 to 2004, he served as the national president of the esteemed Alpha Phi Alpha Fraternity Incorporated, the fraternity to which Dr. King belonged. While serving in this role, Johnson oversaw more than 700 chapters located throughout the United States and abroad, while enhancing their national image of the organization with fraternity members, business leaders, and political officials. Mr. Johnson is also the president of Creative Concourse Concessions. He served as the city attorney for Kendleton, Texas, taught at Texas Southern University in the Thurgood Marshall School of Law and School of Public Affairs. Mr. Johnson dedicates his time and talents to community groups and issues such as voter registration, blood donations, HIV, AIDS, Boy Scouts of America, and Big Brothers. He, in addition, serves on the AARP Foundation Board, the National Urban League Board, and the March of Dimes Board. I'm not sure when he sleeps. Mr. Johnson received his Doctor of Jurisprudence from Texas Southern University, where he was a member of the Thurgood Marshall Student Bar Association. He completed post-baccalaureate work in public administration at St. Louis University and received his Bachelor of Arts from Xavier University in Louisiana. Mr. Johnson is the recipient of many awards, very well deserved, and recognitions for his commitment and service to helping others. Johnson is married and is a proud father and grandfather. Following a brief video, please join me in welcoming Mr. Harry Johnson, who upholds Dr. King's commitment to service and is our guest speaker today. Video, please. Risa, we don't hear any music if there is some.
Okay, I'm going to share again so that the sound plays.
I don't hear the sound on my side, Brisa. Maybe we go ahead and ask Mr. Johnson to share some words with us, and then maybe we can play it at the end of his presentation.
Thank you so much, Deidre, and good morning to everyone. Thank you so much for allowing me to come and speak with you all this morning. I'm especially proud to know Deidre Fontaine. She has been a friend of the families, and she can probably do this speech better than I can. She has been around the Martin Luther King Memorial almost as long as I have. So I thank her and her family for their gracious support over these many years. I also thank all of you who invited me. What a wonderful time that we live in now and the importance of Dr. King's Memorial. I want to talk a little bit about why we built, how the idea about the memorial came about, the process that we had to go through in order to build it, and also the programs that we now have at the Martin Luther King Memorial. So let me start by saying it has been a joy to have worked with the Memorial Foundation, not since its inception because I wasn't around at that time, but the memorial actually got started with an idea of some of Dr. King's fraternity members who lived in the DC, Maryland area. These older gentlemen would actually come and meet on Saturday morning and talk about the issues around Washington, DC. One such issue was, how come more people of color were not going to visit the National Mall? And so they concluded that perhaps if somebody looked like them on the mall, more people of color would go. And so they talked about the idea of maybe we should talk about building a national memorial to somebody of color on the mall. And so these men of Alpha Phi Alpha, as Deidre said, Dr. King's fraternity, came up with this idea that they should spearhead a deal to start building and creating a memorial, a lasting memorial to Dr. King on the National Mall. And so we thought it was relatively funny at the fraternity level. We would go to our national conventions every year across the country, and there these 5 guys would be standing there with their gray hair talking about, help us build a memorial to Dr. King. There would be a box on the table basically saying, make a donation for the memorial of Dr. King. And we got so tired of hearing it over the years, we put our $5, $10, or $20 in the box and say, would you please leave me alone? Ain't nobody gonna build no more to Dr. King on no National Mall, but here's $5, good luck. Lo and behold, in 1996, one of our presidents of Alpha Phi Alpha, a guy by the name of Milton Carver Davis from Alabama, was our national president. And he said, let's see if this thing has any legs. And then he went with a group of alpha men and the original thought leaders to congressional leaders, including Julian Dixon, who was the Alpha Phi Alpha member from California. Lo and behold, they got a bill passed through Congress, signed by Bill Clinton, authorizing the fraternity to build this memorial in honor of Dr. King. After Mr. Davis left office, another president came on board, a guy by the name of Adrian Wallace from Louisiana. And Adrian, being the scientist that he was, he knew what it would take in order to build this memorial, that you had to have a foundation. You had to have all of the A's, B's, and C's in order to pull this together. And so he created the Martin Luther King Memorial Project Foundation to build a memorial of Dr. King. First task was trying to figure out a piece of land that this memorial would sit on. So fittingly enough, they went and they found a piece of land on the mall. Having to report to different commissions in DC, the National Park Service, the National Planning Commission, and others, they actually tried to say that is not a good piece of land that you have. We have a better idea on location for the Martin Luther King Memorial. The location that they had was, of course, in Southeast DC, a predominantly African-American area near the Frederick Douglass home. And they said, smiling, this is a great place for the Martin Luther King Memorial, down Pennsylvania Avenue, across the Anacostia Bridge. And so we said, well, how come we cannot have it over on the mall? And they said, the land that you selected is really reserved for presidents. Well, some of us went to college, and some of them went to college. So they said, well, show us the law that says you cannot build this memorial over where we selected. Of course, they could not show us the law. And so we were granted permission to build on a 4-acre site on the tidal basin between the Lincoln and Jefferson Memorial. How proud we were to get this 4 acres and know that Dr. King would be there. And then the next step was to actually find out what it should look like. And so they set out and did an international competition because nobody has ever built a memorial before in our group. And so they came up and said, what do we want it to look like? International competition, about 3,000 entries from around the world came in. They came in from students, from architectural students, from architectural firms, from engineers and artists. The winning solution was selected, and it was selected by a group called the Roma Group out of California. What that looked like was simply what you now see as the Martin Luther King Memorial. 2 large pieces of stone called the Mountain of Despair coming from Dr. King's speech. Outside the Mountain of Despair was a Stone of Hope, a large boulder that was cut out of the stone mountain and pushed forward. And we said that looks good. And around that Mountain of Despair would be certain quotations from civil rights leaders, including Dr. King, Malcolm X, and others. And so we asked the firm to please go back and come up with one other solution that will make it stand out amongst all other entries. And so they carved Dr. King's face actually on the Stone of Hope. So the picture that you now see of Dr. King is an actual photo that came from his autobiography, where Dr. King is standing there with an ink pen in his hand, pushed out in front of the Mountain of Despair. So after we went several times back to the Commission of Fine Arts and the Park Service, they had questions about, well, you asked for a memorial to Dr. King, so you cannot have quotes from Coretta, you cannot have quotes from Rosa Parks, Malcolm X, or any other civil rights leaders. They have to be all quotes of Dr. King. So then we came back and created a council of historians to come up with the right quotes, 14 of which now sit on the mall at the memorial of Dr. King. And thus the idea began in earnest, and we began to talk about what it would look like, where it would be. And then I became the president of Alpha Phi Alpha. And they said, you got the land, you got the design, now go raise $127 million to build the memorial to Dr. King. Being a lawyer from Houston, I am not a fundraiser. I don't know how to raise money. And so I sat in earnest trying to figure out how in the heck am I going to raise $127 million. I brought together the right team, thank God, and we were able to start in earnest. We had an already donation from a pledge from General Motors at $10 million, a pledge from the Tommy Hilfiger Foundation of $5 million. And we set out trying to figure out who else could we get money from. And Lord and behold, we were able to get some other monies coming in from other corporations, foundations, after they saw that we were able to push forth the idea. A struggle at times, as you can imagine, trying to go to a corporation saying, we got a great idea for Memorial to Dr. King. Some people would say, hey, come back when you get a little further down the line, but we're not ready to come on board yet. We went through several things that happened in the country at the same time. Tsunami, everything else that happened in the world that was going on. And so 9/11 happened, tsunami happened. So it looks like every year and a half, something else would happen that would stop the fundraising efforts. And Lord, behold, you never know who's going to come and be the angel that comes in, even though you're not looking for that angel, or you thought that angel may have been a devil. Who knows? So we actually went to then Senator Robert Byrd. Yes, Robert Byrd, who was a member of the Ku Klux Klan, who had just wrote a book about his life and how he was a member of the Ku Klux Klan and how he changed. And so we went to Senator Byrd and said, Senator Byrd, we can help you change your life a little bit more. We would love to get an appropriation from Congress to help further the cause of the Martin Luther King Memorial. Being a lawyer from Houston, not knowing anything about fundraising, not knowing what to ask for, we asked Senator Byrd for $4 million. And he says, well, why are you asking for $4 million? Why don't I give you $10 million? And then Senator Byrd went to Senator Thad Cochran from Mississippi and said, we're going to give the Martin Luther King Memorial $10 million. And once we got that $10 million match, things just blew up. We were able to go to certain corporations, get them on board and say, if you give us $1 million, it's already matched by Congress. And lo and behold, before you knew it, we were at $40, $50 million. And then things began to go very well from that point. How excited we were once we got everything started that we needed to find someone who was going to carve this great statue of Dr. King. So we went to a stone carver symposium in Minneapolis, Minnesota. We wanted to see stone carvers from all over the world talk about their efforts and what they would make this memorial look like. We went and everybody pointed towards a gentleman who was always taking a nap around 12 o'clock hour. And so they said, that's the person that could do this. And we went and talked to this man who was asleep, woke him up and asked him, was he interested? He happened to be Master Lei from China. Everybody kept saying, why did you choose a Chinese sculptor? Well, we chose Master Lei because he had the ability, the skill set to give us what we wanted. We did not want a laser cut memorial as they are doing now. We wanted somebody with a hammer and chisel to cut this in old world style. And so Master Lei sat out in earnest to carve the statue of Dr. King. It was not without controversy. Many folks reached out to us and said, well, why did you choose an Asian to carve this stone of Dr. King? And finally, somebody called me one day, and it was just happened one of those days I just didn't feel like talking. And then the guy says, well, how come you chose this Asian guy to do this? And I said, well, like Dr. King, we chose it not because of the color of his skin, but by the content of his character. And these terms, his artistic character. This man knows what he's doing, and that's why we chose him. And so when you go visit the Martin Luther King Memorial, you can see the work of Master Lei. You can look at the hands of Dr. King, where the actual veins, or you see the veins in his hand. You see the buttons on his coat, his eyes, and all his features. It was not, again, without controversy, because we had to go and visit Master Lei at China. And one visit we went over there, he had 3 different heads of Dr. King as to which head we would use and pick. And so he showed us one head with Dr. King frowned up just a little bit. And I said, Master Lei, I said, great heads, we like all of them, but there's no way the National Planning Commission will approve Dr. King frowned up looking across the tidal basin at President Jefferson. And Master Lei said to me very innocently, he says, well, everything I've read about Dr. King, he was a warrior. And then I again quickly said, yeah, he was a warrior for peace. Take that frown out of his head. And so when we went back to the commission several weeks later, we showed them the picture of Dr. King with the frown on his head because I knew what they were going to say. And after the meeting, at the conclusion of the meeting, they says, we don't approve this because we don't like this head. And that's what, please give us another 30, 40 days to come back. Already having another picture of the head, we actually went back 30 days later and said, here's another picture. And then they approved that. So they finally approved our design. They approved the wording that would go on the memorial. And so we began construction. How pleased we were, as Deidre mentioned, that the memorial was completed in 2011, and it should have been completed in August 28th. However, because of a hurricane, because of an earthquake, we had to push it to October. And then President, I'm drawing a blank, I'm sorry. President Obama, I apologize. President Obama basically dedicated the first memorial to a person of color on the mall. At that dedication was not just President Obama and his wife, but it was then Vice President Biden and his wife and others across the country who saw this magnificent dedication and honor of Dr. King. It has been a difficult task in raising this money, the process and everything. But after we dedicated, we created a new foundation called the Memorial Foundation, which I now head. What is the Memorial Foundation? The Memorial Foundation is basically existing to have programmatic things around the memorial to keep people interested in coming to the memorial. As Deidre mentioned, the memorial has become the 5th most visited memorial in Washington, D.C. Some 3.2 million visitors each year come to see the Martin Luther King Memorial. It has become a place where world leaders come to reflect and young leaders come to learn how to lead. How proud we are of the many programs that we now do at the memorial. In the summertime, we do free movies every June, July, and August in DC. We do a great luncheon, leadership luncheon during the Congressional Black Caucus in September. We honor Dr. King on his birthday. We honor Dr. King on the day of his death in April, and we do other things around the DC area. Last year, at the middle of the pandemic, driving around Houston, I recalled seeing lines and lines of people in their cars to get items of food because they were hungry. And I mentioned to my staff that we ought to do something at the memorial because the memorial's 4 tenets are just democracy, justice, hope, and love. And let's take one of those tenets, love, and let's do something. And so last year, on February 13th, we actually gave away 550 boxes of food to those who came to the memorial on the Day of Love. We're going to continue that Day of Love this February, and we've got 3 weeks on February 12th at the memorial. We're proud to know that the memorial is more than a piece of stone on the mall. It is actually a living memorial. And thus, after the George Floyd murder and seeing everything that happened, that we created a program. And one program we created was our Social Justice Fellows program. Why did we create that program? We actually created it for us to have our little part in changing society. We're not the Urban League, we're not the NAACP, we're not a large organization, so we can effectuate 1,000, 1,500 people at a time, but we can effectuate 50. And so what we did was created a program for people 18 to 35 to apply to become one of our social justice fellows. How proud we are that this year at our inaugural program piece that we did, we brought together 50 young men and women from around the country, ages 18 to 34, some students in college, some in corporate America, and some entrepreneurs that came together to talk about, hey, during the George Floyd incident, I led a peace march in my city. I did this in honor of George Floyd. I want to do more. So the whole intent of this program is for us to really take protest to policy and teach young men and women how to change your protest and turn it into policy. So how proud we were that this year we had an 8-week program with Roland Martin from off of CNN and MSNBC to be our distinguished lecturer in residence. And he brought in 8 different speakers for the next 8 weeks, Angela Rye, Bakari Sellers, Tim Wise, and others, as they talk to these young 50 students about policy changes. How proud we are that we're going to bring all 50 of them back to Washington, D.C. In March to have a capstone project and then tell us what they want to do and how they're going to change their community. How proud we are of that project. We look forward to another year coming up in June. Applications will be ready. And I encourage all of you who are listening to go to our website, the Memorial Foundation, and put your name on the list so that you too may become one of our social justice fellows. The other program that we came up with was something that we deal with leadership with high school kids. And it is basically our Martin Luther King Global Youth Leadership Conference. We're doing 8 conferences across the country to talk to young high school students and encourage them to learn the principles of leadership of Dr. King, but also learn how to apply to college, go to college, and what to study at college, how to pay for college. We're proud of this. We did it in Washington, D.C. before the pandemic at UDC. We had students come in. We had the Lieutenant Governor of Virginia speak. We had Roland Martin as one of our speakers. We had different speakers for 2 days to these young men and women. And then even Kevin Durant, the basketball player's mother, came to give us our final setting during those 2 days with these young people. We look forward to going to Little Rock, Arkansas, to Philander Smith, to St. Louis, Missouri, Harris Stowe, to New Orleans, Louisiana, Xavier and Dillard University, to Houston, Texas, to Prairie View and Texas Southern University, and then going out to LA and San Francisco with the Urban League as we bring this program together, 300 students that we want to affect in all these 8 cities for a total of 2,400 kids that we're able to talk to, teach, and mentor. How proud I am of what we've done with the Martin Luther King Memorial and the Memorial Project Foundation. As Deidre stated, this past October, we actually had a 10th anniversary celebration. And what a celebration it was to have with us on one day. Well, one night we actually had Congressman Jim Clyburn, who talked about meeting Dr. King and spending an evening talking to Dr. King that should have lasted an hour, lasted well into 4 o'clock in the morning from 10 o'clock that night, listening and being encouraged by Dr. King. The next day, actually, we had the President, Biden. We had Vice President Harris. We had the Speaker of the House. We had the Prime Minister of the Bahamas and members of Congress join us at the site as we commemorated the 10th year anniversary of the opening of the Martin Luther King Memorial. We were encouraged to know that to have this power of leadership in one place other than at the State of the Union was just a feat that no one else has been able to garner. We garnered that a few months ago, how proud we were, how proud we are of the programs that we do at the Memorial Foundation, how proud we are to know that you all here at University of Houston know, care, and follow the actions and deeds of Dr. King. With that, I'm gonna shut up and be glad to answer any questions that anyone may have about the Martin Luther King Memorial in Washington, D.C.
Thank you, Mr. Johnson. And I can say personally, having seen the memorial in person and hearing more about the history, and completely blown away. If I did my math correctly, from the time it started, the inception of the idea to when it actually was resurrected, it was 28 years. And now we're celebrating the 11th year of the memorial being in Washington, D.C. So I want to say congratulations to you and all of your team. We do have a few pre-populated questions that we received. And I think it really ties into what you said earlier about a living memorial and what that's like. So in that vein, hearing all about the programs that you offer, like the Day of Love, the film series, and the Social Justice Fellows, and the other program offerings, do you have any information how people can support those programming opportunities, or what people can do to either financially support, offer community support, or anything along those lines?
Sure. So number one, go to our website, which is thememorialfoundation.org. We encourage you to go there and take a look at the programs. Number one, if you are a student and would like to be one of our fellows, please, we welcome your application, and we hope that we select you. I think we selected about 3 fellows from the Houston area. Number two, when we get ready to come to Houston for our Global Youth Leadership Conference that will be hosted at Texas Southern University, I would love to have University of Houston take part of that, and to be a part of that in some way, either providing students or recommending high school kids to come to the program. Again, we're going to be looking for 300 high school students, and it's actually going to be a 3-day event with a panel discussion on Thursday night. On Friday morning, we're actually going to bring the top 10% students from the HBCUs to meet with our sponsors for potential jobs or internship pieces. And then on Saturday, we deal with the kids. So if you stay tuned to our website, you'll be able to join in and help us out once we come to Houston. Or if you just want to make a donation, I think there's a donate button on this website as well.
Thank you. If anyone in the audience has any questions, we're happy to help moderate those questions if you want to type them in, or if you'd like to raise your hand, we're happy to take questions from the audience. While we get you all prepared to do that, another question that was submitted during the RSVP was a little bit more personal in the sense of, for you, Mr. Johnson, has there been any moment in your life where you feel that Dr. Martin Luther King has influenced you personally? And if so, what did that look like or feel like to you?
Sure. I am a product of the 60s, so I was around when Dr. King was, I wasn't an old man, but I was a student. I was in grade school and then high school, but we were around. And so we knew what was going on in our country, and it became a feeling of wanting to be a part of something. So as young as we were able to take part in marches in our neighborhoods, in our city of St. Louis, but then understanding what was going on in the country. President Kennedy had been shot. Martin Luther King had been shot. Robert Kennedy had been shot. I mean, all this was going on around the same time. And so you actually felt what is going on in our country. And what it meant to somebody like me was simply a realization of a change in the country. And I say that because this country is always evolving, if you will. Years ago, it was Thomas Jefferson who said, is this country going to be a democracy or anarchy? And it was Thomas Jefferson who said, it ought to be a democracy. So therefore, we came up and said it's going to be a democracy. After that, country's about to be split in two again. The President Lincoln, North versus South. And it was President Lincoln that said, this is the United States of America, that we ought to be one country. And so not North America, not North United States, not Southern United States, but the United States. And there again, when Dr. King was around in his 50s and 60s, the country's about to be split in two again, black versus white, have versus have-nots. And it was Dr. King who says, we may have come over on different ships, but we're in the same boat now. And we ought to come together as brothers. And those things just kind of resonated with all of us, that Dr. King was, again, and earned his place on the place where we have him on the mall. Those lessons we took with us as young men and women growing up during that time period. But I can tell you, if you've been to the memorial and you've seen the 14 quotes, the quotes resonate not just at a time when he spoke them in 1954, 1959. Those quotes resonate today. And that's why we chose them. And that's what affects my life every day, is the power of Dr. King to try to bring this country back together again.
Thank you. I do want to just give a shout out to Joshua Wallen. He stated he was actually one of the social justice fellows last year, and it was an amazing experience. Congratulations for that, Joshua. We're happy that you're able to join us today, and love to see this full circle moment for Mr. Johnson, having worked on the memorial and bringing that to life, but also seeing the fruits of its labor as being a living memorial.
Thank you, Joshua. Thank you so much for chiming in. We enjoyed your class immensely.
Wonderful. So another question that was submitted prior to is, what is an interesting fact about Dr. King that most people may not or do not know?
Well, let me just switch it just a little bit. What's the interesting fact about the memorial that most folks don't know? How's that? I can't tell you anything about Dr. King, but I can tell you about the memorial. And the fact is that we added many, many cherry trees there at the site. One fact is that people don't know that the cherry blossoms happen to bloom in April. Those are the favorite trees in DC. They bloom this very pink color. They happen to bloom typically the week Dr. King was assassinated. So the day that this man gave up his life, these beautiful trees that came from Japan happen to bloom all over Washington, D.C., but especially around the tidal basin where Dr. King was. Another interesting fact is that the photo of Dr. King off his autobiography had Dr. King standing with an ink pen in his hand. But when Alpha Phi Alpha sent out the program of support asking people to apply to say what it's going to look like, they inverted the picture. and thus it looked like Dr. King had the pen in his left hand. I got call after call after call. You got Dr. King looking like he's left-handed because the ink pen is his wrong hand. I'm like, what are you talking about? And finally, I had to look and see and figure it out myself. Here's probably what happened. And so I then called Master Lay and said, Master Lay, stop everything you're doing. I'm getting too many complaints about this ink pen in the wrong hand. Master Lay said, it's too late. I've already carved it. Ink pen is in his hand. I said, take the ink pen out, put a scroll of paper in his hand, so it looks like he just finished writing I Have a Dream speech. So that's the one thing that Harry Johnson added to the memorial that nobody knows is there because of Harry Johnson.
That's incredible. And a funny story, as interesting as well. I'm sorry, it just caught me off guard that I feel like that's really wonderful to hear that kind of nugget of information that might not be widely known through this. So another question that we had previously received was more about advice, and maybe from your role and your experience having been raised in an era where you're seeing things happening one-on-one, but then also in your work and then your most recent influence today. But the question itself is, what must we continue to do in our daily walk to honor the memory and the dreams of Dr. Martin Luther King?
I think if we follow the tenets, if we follow what's at the memorial, i.e. justice, hope, democracy, and love, that will speak volumes to making a change. And also, I think that young people, as we saw after George Floyd, you shouldn't be afraid to demand change. This world belongs to you all. It can only be changed by you all. It can't be changed by people with gray hair in their head because they have no concept of what changes that ought to be done at this point in time. Young people ought to continue to want to see change in our democracy, in their lives, in our country. Dr. King once said that anyone could be great because anyone can serve. Keep serving. How do you serve? You serve by helping one another. You serve by helping your neighbor. You serve by helping your community. Sometimes you serve just by having a smile on your face or somebody saying, okay, hey, somebody cares. During this time of COVID, where we don't want to admit it, but we're all still so isolated. And it's affecting all of us mentally, physically. But when somebody just smiles at you and gives you a wink or a nod, it makes you feel better that guess what? I am somebody special. You are somebody special. Let's continue to do the right thing. So I encourage the students at University of Houston, those listening, continue to do good, to be better, and to make change in your life and the lives of others.
Thank you. I'm going to do a another call for questions. Eric, to answer your question, yes, this session is being recorded, and we do plan on posting it on our website for all to see afterwards. In the interim, I'd like to ask our colleague Brisa to go ahead and share the short video that we were intending to share earlier, while we give everyone a little bit more time to get another question or two before we close our session today. Wonderful, thank you. I hope that everyone had a chance to, if you've not seen the MLK Memorial in DC, that you have a chance to really see everything that Mr. Johnson was talking about come to life. We did receive another question, and the question, Mr. Johnson, is, what is your most rewarding experience during this journey?
Well, I have several of them, but many of them were the folks that I met, the many people that I met during the journey, whether it was Mr. J.W. Marriott, Colin Powell, other folks who just met along the journey, who gave their personal stories about Dr. King and their support. And knowing them, knowing that they had a part of this was just fantastic. But then also the most rewarding one is that when we opened the memorial, and a couple of days before we dedicated, I had the opportunity to go with my COO. On a Sunday before it was open to the public, it was closed off, and we would just look up and see and say, we actually did this. We actually did it. Because there were times when we didn't think it was actually going to happen. And the one thing that made me continue on the journey, the one thing that made me realize that it could be done was just being scared. And sometimes it's okay to be scared. I was too scared to fail. And I was not going to have it be said that this thing got messed up under Harry Johnson, because I know how folks act and talk. I know that one president would have said it was all right when I got the bill passed and gave it to his next guy. And this guy said it was all right when I got the land and design. I don't know what Harry did to mess that up. So I did not want my name to go down in history knowing that I failed at this task. So even raising $127 million without any scandal, without anybody going to jail, was a feat that was just duly done, and I was so proud to be a part of it.
Incredible. One of the other comments that I want to share from the chat is from Giselle, who's here at the university, who stated that this event and hearing you talk so passionately about your experience has made her add the Memorial Center to the top of her travel list for 2022. And she just wanted to say thank you for that.
Thank you, Giselle. Please enjoy it when you go. That, the African American Museum, and other things that are in DC, but I think you're going to be just mystified at the Memorial of Dr. King when you go and stand there and look up and see this huge 30-foot tall piece of stone dedicated to Dr. King.
Wonderful. Another question we received is from Kim. Are there any other interesting design decisions that you had to work through in creating the memorial?
Yeah, a few of them. I mean, number one, the stone. So the stone that we chose. Got a question the other day in doing this. So somebody says, well, why did you choose the whitest stone you could find to build this memorial to a person of color? And I said, well, obviously you just look at the pictures that you see. Because when you look at it in person, the stone is actually a pinkish granite that we found in China. The pinkish granite actually turns more brown when you look at it. And it has black speckles in it. So over a period of time, what will actually happen is the black speckles would blend into the stone and turn it darker. Plus the fact that this is a memorial you can see, touch, and feel. I like to say, go see, touch it, and feel it. So as you touch it, you can see where people have rubbed their hand across it, how dark it has gotten. So the stone was a big piece. The folks in the United States, the granite folks, how come you're not using American granite? So what we did was we used North American granite because granite is placed here not by man, but by God. He's the one that placed granite wherever it is. So different parts of the world have different granite. In America, we have basically white granite. In Georgia, in North America and Canada, there's green granite. And so the granite that we chose around the words are all green granite. It's all the same granite, just flipped over. So at some point you walk and you see it's really smooth. Then at some point it's rough. So we actually flipped the granite over for different pieces of walking surfaces and all that. But then when you touch the wall, it flipped over again. So it's smooth. So you can actually read and see the quotes on the wall. So we're proud of what we had to do to make everything work and seem seamlessly. And then they said, well, we still haven't put any American granite. Well, we put the curving as American granite. So that's there too.
Wonderful. And speaking of granite and selection for the memorial, a question that came in is from Leslie stating, was there a quote that what you wanted represented or that was wanted to be represented that did not get chosen?
To be honest with you, no. I stayed in my lane of traffic, and that is, hey, I pointed folks to do certain things. So there was a council of historians, which included Maya Angelou and other historians, people from different colleges and universities that came up with the quotes. They chose the quotes. Actually, we got in trouble because everybody really wanted to see the "I Have a Dream" speech up there. Well, there's no place where you put the "I Have a Dream" speech up there, and everybody thought, well, maybe how come it can't go on the side of the Stone of Hope? But if that were the case, you would have to use a magnifying glass to actually read and see it. So just wasn't any room for it. But there was a partial quote from the "I Have a Dream" speech that a blogger, and I didn't know what a blogger was 10 years ago, made a statement and said it made him look like a twit or something like that. And they asked Maya Angelou, doesn't that seem like that? And she said, yeah, it does. So we actually had to take that quote off the side of the Stone of Hope. So we actually had to bring Master Lake back and get him to take that piece off. And everybody said, well, how do you feel about that? I said, I could care less. The memorial is built. If they want to take off whatever, that's fine with me. We've done the work, built it. If somebody's not happy with them, we'll deal with that later on. But there are mistakes in every memorial in DC. We're just proud that Martin Luther King Memorial stands there and that it is the 5th most visible memorial there.
Wonderful. So it looks like we may have come to an end in questions. So I want to just give people just a few more seconds if you want to raise your hand if you have a question. And going once, going twice, and third time's a charm here. Okay, so again, I want to say thank you again to Mr. Johnson. We do have a closing remarks by our Staff Council President, Denisha Allen, who will also be providing more information about Staff Council events. Denisha?
Thank you.
Good afternoon, everyone, and thanks for participating in today's Staff Council Workplace Conversation presented by our Diversity, Equity, and Inclusion Committee. Staff Council is currently preparing additional staff-focused events and programming to help staff remain fully engaged and increase staff morale. Please join us in the upcoming months for Her Story, featuring women in leadership at UH, the opening of Staff Council scholarships applications at the end of March, and the annual Spring Egg Hunt. In addition, we are currently accepting applications for the professional development reimbursement. Again, thanks to each of you, and special thanks to our special guest today, Mr. Harry E. Johnson. This has been a true pleasure to have you join and present to us. And as always, Staff Council stands for you. So this concludes our event. Thank you, everyone. Have a great day.